Hello, and welcome to Finlandia Foundation in Conversation. I'm your host, Maria Voltaine, for this new podcast series where we talk with Finns and Finnish Americans who've primarily made their mark in the world of entertainment, but not only just that. People with interesting life stories and fascinating experiences that we can all enjoy hearing about, and maybe even learn a thing or two in the process. My first guest, Philip Bailey, works at NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab, JPL, right here in Pasadena, California, and not too far away from our Finlandia Foundation national office, in fact. Philip works on the Mars 2020 rover Perseverance that recently landed on the surface of Mars. But rather than try to explain everything he does myself, why not have him here to tell us himself directly? Tervetuloa, Philip. Thank you for being here.
Kiitos. Yeah, thank you for having me. Yes, I work as a robotic systems engineer at JPL on the Mars 2020 rover. I previously worked on the InSight lander that landed a few years ago as well. On Mars 2020, I have been defining a lot of the first time activities that we're going to be operating or we're going to be running to check out the robotic arm and all the associated functionality. The first of which have already ran a few days ago, and the rest of which are running just in the coming days. Before landing, I was involved in verification and validation and testing on both this robotic arm that we have on the Mars rover, but also the ones that we have here on Earth to do some of our testing and checking out our functionality. And I'm also going to be involved in looking at the long-term trending and health and safety or health of the arm itself, looking at how it's operating and whether or not it's working as expected.
Wow, that's amazing. I definitely want to hear more about this, and we'll get to that. But I'd like to start off with your background. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? Are you American born? What's your family like?
Yeah, sure. I was born in Massachusetts. My mom is from Finland. She was born in Finland and came over here for college. Uh, she met my dad, they got married, and she stayed here. And so growing up, I would always travel to Finland at least once a year, usually in the summer for about a month. And then we would go in the winter for maybe a week or two for Christmas too sometimes. And we would always stay with my grandparents in Kuopio. And I would essentially grew up spending my whole summer there. So yeah, I have dual citizenship with Finland and America, and I, grew up fully bilingual, and so it's always been part of my upbringing. I went to college at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, and then after that, I came out here and have been working here for about 7 years now.
My dad is from the Kuopio area, but grew up in Lapland. But his parents, my grandparents, went back when I was little, so
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time there in that area and know it well. So, but how did your interest in science begin, and how did it evolve to you being now here?
Well, so I guess it's twofold. I always grew up with Legos when that was like my gateway engineering. And so I had massive boxes of like assorted Legos that I would just build with. And every summer as well in Finland at my grandparents' lake house, we would always build something with my grandfather. We always did some woodworking or something the whole summer. And then I don't really remember when I first started getting interested in robotics. I guess I just always was, and space as well. I was just as far back as I can remember, I was always interested in space and spaceships and Star Wars and all that. And so when I got to high school, I was in our robotics team. Eventually, became the captain of the robotics team, and then I went on to college to look for somewhere where I could continue doing that. And so my degree was technically in electrical and computer engineering, but I pretty much took robotics classes across the board because most of them double counted for my major as well. And so I stayed and did a 5th-year master's there before coming here to work. And yeah, in the beginning, doing electrical engineering, it was interesting and stuff. But then it was really when I started being able to do the robotics classes that I remembered, like, oh yeah, no, this is what I love. This is what I came here for. I previously also interned at a couple other FFRDCs, like federal research places. And then I interned at SpaceX as well before I ended up really realizing that what I wanted to do more was the payloads, the robotics that goes into the rockets rather than the rockets themselves. So
Just on a side note, I heard about a Finnish company called Vaisala who were involved with the Mars 2020 rover as well. I think they may have been through the European Space Agency, though. Do you know anything about that or other Finnish involvement with this?
I don't, but I do know. So I do know we work with the European Space Agency a good amount here at JPL. A lot of, especially on Insight, there was a lot of things, especially from the French and the Germans. But I actually am expecting on the next project I'll be eventually working on is the rest of the Mars sample return mission, which Mars 2020 was the first piece of that, which was a rover that would go there, drill core samples out of rocks, put them into test tubes. Then we have another mission that's going to be going in a few years that's going to be essentially taking a rover with it to go fetch those test tubes, stick them in another rocket, stick it up into, and then launch it into space where a satellite will catch it and then launch it to Earth.
That's crazy. I heard about you now collecting samples to bring back to
Yeah.
Earth. It's unbelievable enough that you can launch a rocket and land it on Mars in the first place. But how on Earth, or should I say, how on Mars, are you going to be able to launch a rocket back from Mars to bring stuff to Earth? Do you have a layman's way of explaining that to us?
I'll say that it requires a long-term vision, right? Because they've been working on this since the last rover, right? The Mars 2020 or Perseverance was always intended as the first piece of this relay race. And so, with it working on Mars now the focus shifts to the next pieces, which are all still, in work right now, and they're not finalized. But I will be working on the lander part of it that will have the rover and the rocket that will launch it up from Mars. And a lot of those pieces are being done by the European Space Agency, I believe, and so we'll be working closely with them.
So it's like a global effort to make this work, then, sounds like.
Honestly, a lot of these missions have been a global effort, really. Like a lot of the instruments, a lot of the there was even, I think, on the Curiosity rover, there was the Canada arm. It was done by the Canadians, and so there's a lot of, or maybe that was on the space station. But it's always a global effort, really, with all of these. Um, yeah, it's definitely a global effort on all these missions, and we have a team. We have a science team here coming from all over the world who, unfortunately, because of COVID, cannot be here, right? But generally speaking, we would be there all in one room with the whole team, uh, working on this and currently we're working on a Mars schedule, which is stressful. Tonight, for instance, I'm not working today, but I would, if I were at work, I would be starting around midnight tonight. Um,
Wow.
and it shifts by about 40 minutes every single day. And so throughout the day or throughout, so because Mars is about 40-ish minutes longer their day, then and we need to always be planning what we're doing for the next day in preparation for the Martian day. Our day shifts by 40 minutes each day. So this schedule has been, it's taxing, right? And so we've all been preparing for it. And so this is going to be a lot of late nights now for the next little while, and then eventually it'll flip back over, so it's daytime again, and so those are much more comfortable shifts. But we're all, many of the people on the team are working fully remotely even during those hours. I have been going in to our surface mission control area, and they've set up all kinds of COVID things for the times, right? But they've really had to limit the number of people who are allowed to be there. Many rooms have like one or two people with like glass or plexiglass, or like sitting far away from each other. So
Okay, so that's how you're handling the COVID era with a limited mix of people in person and then the rest at home.
yeah, exactly. So there's a honestly, the fact that we got here, since this whole mission, or since maybe about 4 or 5 months before launch, it's been COVID, right?
Right.
Maybe a little bit
Yeah.
less than that. So we've gone through the final integration and tests. We've gone through launch. We've gone through the cruise to Mars, all the final testing and verification and checking, and now landing, mostly remotely with some subset of people who are needed in person to be hands-on.
Wow. So this is an even more impressive accomplishment. It's already one of those major feats of humanity. But especially during COVID, when there's so much suffering all around and the challenges of working together in the first place, and then to have this unbelievable testament to the human spirit. Honestly, as Finns, the fact that it's called Perseverance,
Yeah.
we've been calling it Sisu.
Sisu-roveri.
Yeah, Sisu Roveri.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a very interesting experience. And actually I had a, firsthand, I was on my way flying to Kennedy Space Center in Florida to do some testing when the lockdowns happened, and they called me back. They said, everyone get back here right now. If you're not already there doing the thing, come back right now. And so I was in I think I was in Minnesota or something on a connecting flight, right? And I get off my first flight. I get a call from my boss that said, "Yep, we're getting it back. We'll get you a new flight, and just come home and support from here." And so, yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it was unfortunate not to be able to go to Kennedy Space Center in person, I guess, because that would always have been very exciting. I went there as a kid, but I never really got to go work there because the InSight launch happened actually from here in Vandenberg, which is just north of here, the Air Force Base. Yeah, so this one, 2020 went from Florida from Kennedy Space Center, but InSight was from Vandenberg, so that's where we went for that one. So, and it was a shame not to be able to go in person for the launch. So we were all expecting to be able to go. Everyone I knew was like, "Yeah, we're getting our tickets. We're gonna have a really great time there." But then, yeah, it's unfortunate. We all had to watch it remotely, and actually, we had an earthquake as it was happening here, which was the craziest part of it. So. Yeah, and then the landing itself also was just a very completely different experience than for InSight. It's a really crazy experience that they call it the 7 minutes of terror. From when it first enters the Martian atmosphere till it's on the ground is about 7 minutes, and it's just honestly like it just you're holding your breath the whole time, especially
Wow.
because the one-way light time from Mars is 11 minutes. So whatever happened already happened by the time you're seeing it. It's already on the ground or not. So by the time you're seeing it on TV or we're seeing it on our monitors, it's already happened. So it's very nerve-wracking. And so, but for Mars 2020, I was watching it from home with my wife, and we were in a bunch of different meetings at the same time, all with our cameras, seeing everybody cheering on their cameras and stuff. But it was very, very different because from the InSight landing, we were all there with our our landing shirts and sitting at our desks ready. But there was only a very limited team that was there in person for that part. So.
Propulsion, go. EDL phase lead, go.
We have deemed Perseverance ready to execute entry, descent, and landing on her own.
Confirmation of entry interface. Perseverance is currently going 5.3 kilometers per second, about 120 kilometers from the surface of Mars. It will start controlling its path to the landing target. Parachute has deployed and we are seeing significant deceleration. The heat shield has been separated. Perseverance now has radar lock on the ground. The back shell has separated. Skyfin maneuver has started, about 20 meters off the surface.
Tango Delta, nominal.
Touchdown confirmed. Perseverance safely on the surface of Mars, ready to begin seeking the sands of past life.
Now, we've seen the videos of everyone cheering from all around the world. I can't even begin to imagine how it must feel to actually pull this off. For me, it's mind-blowing how anyone can come up with ways to leave Earth, get a machine to travel all the way to Mars, pass through the Martian atmosphere, and land safely.
I know. Well, I mean, we have many engineers doing so much testing on everything. this particular landing method was first tested on the Curiosity rover in 2012, and so we had done it before, so that was somewhat of a bonus. But the really exciting thing was that we had the landing vision system as well, which let us. They actually took images, and you can find the video online of the actual images it used to process and steer and land on there. And so that whole landing video is mind blowing. The yeah, it honestly is such like a mad scientist thinking of how to actually do that landing, with a hovering platform that lowers it on cables and then lets go and flies off. And it's kind of crazy, right?
Who could even think like that? I'm fascinated that a human mind can be that brilliant to
Yeah.
conjure up something like this. Most of us can barely operate equipment that already exists here on Earth.
Yeah. The JPL motto is "Dare Mighty Things," so the that sort of fits with that. And I think it's a lot of really crazy engineering, and it's always really exciting when we get to push for these new things to be used in flight applications. Because you always have to balance with what's like new and exciting with what's been tested and run and well certified for the job, right?
So, in these tests, does it always just flow and work perfectly? Or do you sometimes have disastrous situations where it all comes undone? Is there anything you can share? Any interesting anecdotes from these tests?
So I can't speak too much to the landing folks. Those guys are, they do. They're a great team. I don't know too much into how, their stuff worked. But as far as the robotic arm, there's always things that go wrong a little bit. But really, it's been mostly smooth sailing. It really the biggest issue for us is often the schedule, right? Like we have so much stuff that we need to do in so little time. That I can share as well. But
You probably can't tell us
yeah.
everything. I get that. Yeah. What about some stories about things that did go well? Some anecdotes that you find interesting and that's kind of unique, maybe?
Well, um, I I will say that to begin with, for Mars 2020, it's mostly been going uh, as expected, but it's still really, really exciting to see it all working. The other day we moved the arm for the first time on Mars, and that just was super, super exciting. We drove for the first time just yesterday.
Did you get to drive it?
So I am not personally writing the rover driving sequences, but I have been writing some of the robotic arm ones that are moving the robotic arm. But yeah, so everything for that has been going really well. I think.
Well, let me ask you this. How do you drive that thing, or even the robotic arm movement, from here? Is it like a remote control car, just from a different planet?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Yeah, so we actually have to plan out all the activities that we do in the entire day beforehand. So that's what we're doing during night on Mars, right? We spend the whole day, we plan, we simulate, we check everything over several times. We have many different people putting in small pieces into the plan, and then we send it off in one packet, right? And then it executes over the course of the day. Then we come back the next at the end of the Martian day, or whenever one of the satellites goes overhead on Mars, and then we look at that data and then check, hey, did this follow the script that we set out? Essentially, like, did it follow the plan? So everything that it does during the day was pre-planned. There's no joysticking involved. We can't really just press forward a little bit, wait 22 minutes for the command to get there, for it to do the thing, and the command to come back 11 minutes each way right now. So that everything is very carefully thought out, planned out, simulated, checked. We send it up, and then we just are excited about seeing the data come back the next day. The other night, I was actually the one on shift looking at the data that was coming down for the robotic arm when we first did our first unstow and our first motions. And everyone just had a massive sigh of relief, right? And everyone was cheering, when we saw the first pictures that showed that it had moved. And so it just is a very, it's a you can breathe easy after it all works. And yeah, and I can speak a little better about the long term for my previous mission, which is Insight, which I still am every now and then going in and controlling the robotic arm for Insight even. The purpose of that mission was to essentially get a very sensitive seismometer to Mars that's sensitive enough to it could sense a butterfly across the room, for instance, on Earth, right? And yeah, so we had to place that. We placed a heat flow probe, and so the point of that one was to dig into the Earth, and so dig into Mars. It was supposed to dig about several meters into the ground. However, that actually is something that I can speak to as one major issue that we had, and we eventually had to call off our attempt at getting it to continue digging. So on Insight, we placed this the heat flow and physical properties probe on the ground, and it works like a hammer, which it has a thing that essentially winds up and hits itself down, and it pulls like a tether behind it. So it's supposed to like knock itself like a hammer nail into the ground. But then, unfortunately, it was not making any progress, and so we actually spent quite a long time on the anomaly resolution effort here, trying all kinds of interesting things, such as, well, it was never intended to be touched with the arm, but then we eventually pulled off the whole back structure and pushed down on it manually with the arm to get it to go into the ground, to give it that extra oomph it needed. And we did eventually get it completely into the ground, but it wasn't making any progress. And so it does give us a little bit of data, but not as much data as it would have. If it had gone all the way into the ground, it would have had a lot of little sensors on it, so we would have seen heat escaping from Mars, and we would understand better about the properties of the Martian core. But but as it stands, we only got the first couple sensors into the ground. But it was a long effort, and there were some major setbacks there, right? Our first attempt was actually, and I don't have a good thing, but if this is the mole is what it's called, we actually were pushing on it sideways with the scoop because we wanted to be a little bit more careful. We didn't want to break the tether or anything, but and it was making progress. And then eventually, all of a sudden one day, it just backed all the way out. And so this is what happens when we plan the entire sol. It's called a sol on Mars. So the entire sol's activity in one go, and we send it up. And then we just come back the next day and see what happened. And it just completely backed out. And so we had to start from scratch again, push down on it while it hammers and get it into the ground. Ultimately, we believe that the reason that it didn't work is simply that the soil properties, or the regolith properties is what it's called, on Mars are just different from anything we could have expected. And so we just were not getting the friction that we needed on the sides for it to actually be able to hammer straight down. And so, in itself, that taught us some science. We got some new science out of it, and all our planetary geologists are thrilled about the exciting soil mechanics test that they got for the heat flow probe team, it was actually, that instrument was built by the Germans, DLR. So they were not as happy about that, but it is in the ground. We are getting some data from it, so that is good. But unfortunately, we had to call off that effort, partially because it's going into Martian winter, and we have solar panels, and the solar panels are getting dusty, and we can't do as much stuff anymore on that lander because we just don't have the power. It takes a lot of energy also to keep us heated, keep us working, right? Because it gets very cold on Mars. It gets up to 0 Celsius on a warm day in the middle of summer.
Would that be their equator area?
It is around the equator, so there is not a lot of. It's a little bit north of the equator, but still, it's enough variation. Yeah. So, but we're still working on it, and we're we just have to plan differently with that in mind.
What about all the talks about putting people on Mars? That is where we're headed. Would anyone want to spend time there, though, other than astronauts and scientists?
Well, so I'll say a couple things. One, from a scientific perspective, definitely, right? We want to understand Mars because understanding Mars will help us understand Earth as well, right?
No, that part for
Yeah.
sure. I get it.
And honestly, I mean, obviously, I think it's not a better alternative than living on Earth, right? That's obviously not going to be the case. But I understand the argument as a fallback, and in general, right, for humans to, I think we've always kind of wanted to move out into the stars at some point, right? So it's always been sort of the human dream to have conquer the solar system or the galaxy or whatnot. And so this is one first step in that process. But Mars 2020 actually is carrying on it one very important piece to that, and it's called MOXIE. It is a experiment that is going to try and create oxygen on Mars, or rather, pull in some Martian atmosphere, which, among other things, has carbon dioxide, right? And it's going to try and create oxygen. Um,
Oh, so that's how you plan on getting breathable air to Mars.
right. Well, the first step to going to Mars is making sure that the people can have breathable air, right, and make enough breathable air for their habitat, for whatnot. And so that it's an important piece. I mean, one of the biggest pieces and challenges for human travel to Mars right now is the radiation on the way, right? We want to be able to get there without the interstellar radiation just, killing everybody on the way. So
Oh, so the radiation is that much of a
that in
challenge.
itself is one of the biggest challenges, even just getting there, right? We're sort of, even the moon is still somewhat protected by Earth's magnetosphere, right? And so it's going beyond there, suddenly, like, we're unprotected by Earth's magnetic field, and it can cause issues.
So, how long does it take to fly the rover to Mars? How long is that trip?
So partially it depends on how you go. Certain rockets, we have done a maneuver where we actually go around the inner solar system once and slingshot ourselves that way, when we need to. And mostly that's for outer planets and the outer solar system, right? We actually gain speed by doing a gravity assist by Earth. But I think it also, I mean, it depends on how heavy it is. Insight was pretty quick. I recall we launched in about May. We landed in just after Thanksgiving, so November, end of November. In 2020, I recall, launched in June and landed in February. So that was a little longer. So, but yeah.
So, you use the Earth's gravity to sling objects for speed. That's another crazy concept for me, again, to even come up with a plan like that. Oh, yeah. Why don't we just slingshot them on the outbound? And then it actually works. Speaking of gravity, though, what's the gravity situation on Mars? What's that like?
Lighter, 38%, I believe, of Earth's gravity. So, a lot of the things we have to worry about here, like I said, we have a test bed here where we have a robotic arm that is on essentially a hexapod that can turn and move, right? We also are building we have now a vehicle test bed, which is a full one-to-one of the rover, right, in our Mars yard here on Earth. And there we can test driving under certain conditions. We can test drilling, we can test end-to-end testing like that. However, what we never can really test is full Martian environment, either from a temperature standpoint, but also from a gravity standpoint. Even moving the arm requires more energy on Earth, right, than it does on Mars. And so we have to account for all those things. And, things, for instance, on InSight, the arm was not quite as large as the 2020 arm. The 2020 arm is very large, very beefy to hold the massive weight of the turret on the end of it. But the inside arm was very small and quite narrow, and it actually had visible deflection under gravity load, like when you're trying to lift something on Earth. But on Mars, that was significantly less because things are just, because gravity is just that much less there. So it's something that you definitely have to take into account. And, even the driving folks have to account for the fact that, friction is less, right, if you have less gravity.
Oh, yeah,
So
right. Okay, and then there's now the helicopter that's also been taken out there.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm really excited for that, actually. That
Is it the same thing? The daily coordinates get sent out the same way as for the rover?
Yeah, so it's going to be the same process, right? We send it the whole plan. It's going to fly and do what it's going to do. But I'm super excited for the helicopter. It's a first of its kind, uh, technology demonstration on Mars, and it could be the future if it works as expected. It could be the future for how we explore Mars. We might bring a bunch of small helicopters and have them go off and map and explore, and it could even in the future go map out our path ahead of us, right, for the rover, so that we can get better maps, because we do have pretty nice satellite imagery of most of Mars, but with the resolution we can get with a small drone is better, right? But yeah, so like I was saying, it is going to be very interesting, this helicopter, because that one, the Martian atmosphere is only 10% as thick as as Earth's atmosphere, which means that you just have to spin your blades that much faster to get the lift that you need. I don't remember the exact numbers on that, but I know that the blades are flying or are spinning very, very fast to get lift. And like I said, once we place it on the ground, we will be essentially giving the helicopter a few weeks of just doing its experiment, and it will be using it'll be sending stuff to the rover, which the rover will then send back to Earth. And so the whole team for that has been very excited about it. Some of the people working on it, I know, have been trying to get a helicopter onto Mars for 20 years now, or more even. This has been their thing that they've been trying to do, and they are so excited that it finally came to fruition. And yeah, but that piece is something that they have been able to test here on Earth. We have these massive vacuum chambers at JPL where we have like 50-foot vacuum chambers where we can suck out, I guess, 90%, right, of the atmosphere in the vacuum chamber, and then we try and fly, right? Unfortunately, the gravity situation will be a little bit different, but I think we've also tried things like gravity offload fixtures, like something pulling up at a certain, exerting a force to counteract gravity, and so we can be, if we're creative with it, we can attempt to recreate Martian conditions here on Earth. There are some things where it's just not possible, but we do go through, before we launched this rover that's there right now. We did thermal tests. We did a full day in the life on Mars under the right atmospheric and temperature conditions, right? So and the fun anecdote I have about the atmosphere is, I don't know if you watched the movie or read the book, The Martian.
No, I
Uh,
haven't.
yeah, with the most of that book is technology that's either in work or already exists, right?
Oh, wow.
Obviously, a lot of the things about him being able to grow food on Mars is something that's only theoretical. But the one big plot hole was the whole inciting incident of him getting essentially impaled with a satellite dish, and that's why they left him there on Mars, and that's why he was there alone. That whole inciting incident, however, it really is not possible because the Martian atmosphere is just so thin that even if you get 100-mile-an-hour winds, they're just not going to be pushing enough force to actually do that, to like launch it like a missile at this guy. Right. So
Well, that's interesting because you hear about Martian winds, and hasn't that been a big reason for some of the rovers breaking down?
mostly dust. Dust dust clouds, dust storms, they're a real problem, especially for anything that has solar panels, because over time it will deposit on there. Your solar panels will work less and less effectively over time. And then if you go into a Martian winter with covered solar panels, and I don't remember which of the rovers, but if it was in a crater as well, right? So it didn't get perfect sun angle. And so, that sort of stuff can be a real threat.
So, how would you clean those solar panels? I mean, here in Southern California, many of us have them and constantly are hearing, "Have you cleaned your solar panels? They won't work if you don't clean them." So, how do you clean them out there to get the dust off?
Yeah, so we don't. We hope that the
Oh,
wind will do it.
okay. So that takes care
Uh,
of it then.
Maybe it will blow off some, but it doesn't. It won't blow off all of it, and especially the wind is not as strong as it is on Earth because of the thinner atmosphere, but it does blow some, and every now and then we get a dust devil that can go over, that can really be a nice cleaning event, and we always hope for those. On InSight, we actually did something interesting recently, which was run the motors that open the solar panels, which were only really designed to be run the once to get the solar panels open the first time. We never intended to close them, right? So it was a one-way thing. But we ran them, and we actually managed to shake the solar panels a little bit, hoping that a little bit of the dust would get wiped off. So now I'm not entirely sure if the power team saw an improvement after that, but we did try those sort of clever things to try and get it clean. And of course, on Mars 2020 and Curiosity, we don't have that problem, right? We have a nuclear generator on them. So.
Oh, I didn't realize you have a nuclear generator. Of course, makes sense why you'd need that.
Yeah, we have an RTG. Yeah, so it's that one. We don't need the sun, and all we need to do is just wait for it to charge up again if we use too much power. So that's why Curiosity has been going strong since 2012 now, right? And their power story is, well, I'm not entirely sure, but there's no real reason that that an RTG could not last longer than that, right? And so it's going strong still. And so Mars 2020, we're hoping will also be able to run for a long time past its prime mission. The Curiosity rover is significantly past its prime mission, which was, I don't remember, but I think it was only like maybe I don't remember exactly how long it was, but most of these rovers, even even Spirit and Opportunity, it was 180 days was their prime mission. That's what they were they were designed for more than that, obviously, but that's what the requirements were. That's what we had to hit. And they lasted for, well, let's see, I think it was almost 12 years, was it, before Spirit and Opportunity, before they both were done. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So even though the prime mission is always a much shorter period, a lot of these things have continued working for quite a long time and have done all kinds of science that wasn't even initially thought of when we launched it.
So how long is Perseverance's prime mission for?
So that's going to depend. It's a more I'm actually not entirely sure what the intended timing is. I know that the intended goal is to fill out those test tubes that we have, and we only have a fixed number of those. So and so we're going to be trying to fill those with interesting, geologically interesting core samples of rocks, and then leave them for the fetch rover to go pick up when we send the next lander.
When was that happening again?
I believe it's 2026, but I'm not entirely sure, and that can change. So.
Wow, so many amazing things are going on and so much to take in.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you a little bit about career advice for anyone seeing this and wanting to follow your path. Would you happen to have any advice for somebody who wants a career at NASA or JPL?
Sure. Let's see. Well, I mean, I know in general with, robotics, there's a lot of different fields you can go through, mechanical, electrical, or computer science. I was mostly on the computer science and electrical side, so that's the one that I know more about. But there's a lot of different paths to go that way. The funniest advice that I always can give is that it's amazing how often problems come down to like geometry, basic geometry, right? Like the type of stuff I don't know, in like 8th or 9th grade or something, the basic geometry, triangles, right? Those sort of things, angles. It's amazing how often I end up being able to reduce a problem to that sort of thing when it comes to robotics. Yeah, and just it's good to stay interested, to work on things you're interested in, and I always loved my Legos and eventually moved on from that to other engineering. But it's yeah, I mean, I count myself very lucky to have been able to have the path that I have to get to this point, to work on the stuff that I've always dreamed of working on. But Yeah, Perseverance. Sisu.
Yeah, and you know, there are a lot of engineers in Finland. It's actually a pretty common field and profession for the
Yeah.
Finns. I guess we tend to have many minds that work in that scientific way out there. I'm not one of them, but I'm very happy that we have you representing. Do you happen to know if there are other Finns at JPL?
I have met a couple over the years I've been at JPL. Some of them have been there as like as a researcher for a while. I think I know at least a couple who are other full-time employees. But yeah, it's you're always surprised where you see it, right? I don't run into too many Finns here in LA, but I did walking at the Getty one time. There was just a couple people speaking in Finnish, and I don't remember what I did, but I think I walked by and went like, suomalaisia, no niin, and then just kept walking. That was just my. They both were like, what? Just what just happened?
Yeah. For some reason, when Finns run into other Finns while abroad, they often pretend they don't notice or are just weirded out when they do come into contact. Like, hi. They get shy or something. But if you see other Americans in Europe, for example, it's like, hi, Americans.
Yeah, Americans, wow.
Nice to see you here. Where are you from?
Yeah.
How's it going?
My mom and I were hiking in Kuopio once near the Puijontornis in Kuopio, and we were like walking around in there's like these trails that go around there, and there was some lady was like running the other way and was, stopped us and started talking to us in like a very, very thick accent with Finnish accent, and she was like, I'm sorry, do you guys speak English? I'm from New York. And like we're like, yeah, okay, sure, yeah, what's up, we live in Boston. So but yeah, so that was that's definitely true. I have had some of the other Finns I've met here in LA have been a little bit less excited to talk about Finnishness.
I think there's a group of Finns that when they move here, they want to kind of put that aside and not really think about Finland. It's like, we're here now, forget Finland. I was kind of like that myself. I mean, I grew up here for part of my childhood and then came back as a young adult. I was that I'm here now person. And I didn't really want to think about Finland, but now I appreciate it on a totally different level.
Yeah. I think my mom too, she's now lived here, what, 40 years now in the US. I think when she goes back to Finland, she's clearly very Americanized, I think. Me too, right? Like I'm very American for a Finn, I guess, but so talkative, I guess, and those sort of things. But it is, it is what it is. There's some cultural differences, but I always really love when I'm in Finland, and it's especially going to my cousins or my grandparents' lake house, and things are a lot calmer, I have to say, which is very refreshing, especially when everything was very hectic going there, taking a sauna, and that sort of thing. And I'm very, even now I was gonna go with sometime in the last year at least, because it's now been a couple of years since I've been able to go because of COVID. And so it's definitely always a part of my heart, right? And I always really enjoy my time there, and cultural differences, the cultural dichotomy, right? With the my dad's side of the family was very New England American, and my mom's side of the family was supi suomalaisia. And then yeah, well, I grew up going to Suomikoulu, so like every Saturday, and so that's how I always got to practice when I was little. And I even met, still now, one of my best friends I met when I was 3 at Suomikoulu. And yeah, and so like I do intend that when I have kids, that I'd like to have them learn Finnish as well, and have that piece, right, that I grew up with. So
That's really neat. So nice to hear that. Wow, so many cool things about you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me. And we are reaching the end of the time here, so I did want to ask if you have any future goals you'd like to share with us. I know this Mars work is going to take a long time and evolve, but are there any other goals?
Well, I definitely want to. Well, I'm excited to be working on and hopefully have a even larger role on the next mission. Right, that's sort of how we, each mission you get a little bit larger role hopefully. And so the sample return lander I'm very excited about. And now that Mars 2020 is there, we can all start that one. Because if Mars 2020 didn't land, then or something had happened, we would have had to completely rethink the future pipeline of missions, right? So we only get one shot at all of that. So it's very important that it works. But yeah, so I think that would be something I would be interested in. I've always thought about doing a PhD as well. I've been I've enjoyed my time here, and a master's has been enough for me to get by on most of what I need. But I've always considered going back and being a systems engineer. I think I've been more of a generalist recently across like different kinds of robotics fields, like mechanical, electrical, and software. If I did go do a PhD, I'd have to be way more uh, focused on one particular aspect. But these are what I've been thinking about. And the LA dream, someday being able to afford a house.
Yeah.
Because of
This state is a little crazy out here, but
no, my wife and I are actively looking actually, but it just is but yeah, living in LA, right, having been here now 6 or 7 years, you finally get to that point when you can actually maybe afford to buy something like that. But I in Massachusetts even I probably could have bought something a while ago.
yeah, it's definitely cheaper there. Maybe not
Yeah,
in Boston, but in other areas around there.
yeah, it's kind of crazy, but so that short-term goals like that.
Well, hey, I'm so grateful that you were willing to talk with me today and tell us all about this amazing stuff that you guys are doing. I'm sure that our audience will really appreciate learning about you and what's going on in Mars, and that you've educated us a bit about how that all works. So,
Sure. And yeah, I've always actually been interested in seeing some of the Finlandia Foundation and other things here in LA. I've always been meaning to go to the museum that's over here, right? There's like a small Finnish heritage museum in Pasadena.
well, hey, anytime you want to come over, let me know and I will show you around. I'll give you the tour. So, yeah, tervetuloa.
Yep.
So,
Sounds
yeah,
good.
I wish you so much luck with everything that you've got going on. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, there you have it. The first episode of Finlandia Foundation in Conversation. I really hope you enjoyed this talk. I sure did. If you want to know more about the Mars 2020 rover Perseverance, or SISU, as we Finns have now christened her, there's a dedicated social media just for her, Twitter and Facebooks, and the NASA website is an amazing resource where they upload high-resolution images and videos from Mars and in general from everything that they're doing. I highly recommend visiting. You might just get sucked in like I was. And if you're interested in learning more about Finlandia Foundation National, please visit our website and social media and sign up. And we also have a newsletter if you want to hear more about what we're doing. We have 58 locations around the US, so maybe you can find some local Finns in your area if you're interested. And I can always be reached at the Finlandia Foundation National Office. I hope to see you next time when we continue with Finlandia Foundation in Conversation and our next guest. Until then, bye!